Hey y'all, what's happening? It is Monday, November the 4th, the day before Election Day, and we've done some work making progress on the flying wings. One is a little bit ahead of the other one, but not by much. They're both roughly at the same stage. Before I get started though, I've got a shout out. I received a shop card from the bearded guy, Jeff Lawless, and that is his shop card. He's up in Kentucky, so give him a check. He is also on YouTube. Also, of course he's on YouTube. This is YouTube. I meant to say he's on TikTok, at the bearded guy Jeff. I don't do TikTok. Yeah. Anyway, check him out. He's got some neat stuff. I like that. That might be an El Camino with a camper, or it might be the Ford Ranchero with the camper. Anyway, that's kind of cool. I like that. And then I was at the hobby shop today. I had to get some more primer. They didn't have the black Mr. Surfacer primer that I started using on this, and it won't be enough to finish both wings on the exterior before I start paint. So what I ended up buying was the Alclad filler primer, which is a black primer, and we'll try that. And then over that, I already have the black base from Alclad, and then we can use our different metal colors on different panels. But while I was there, I noticed a new paint display that I hadn't noticed before. It's a pro acrylic paint, Monument Hobbies. I don't know, have any of y'all seen this before? I picked up the brochure just so I could look at it a little closer. It looks like they've got a really detailed line of paints. I don't see any FS numbers on these, so I don't know that it's going to work well for military. But if you're doing cars, you can probably get away with whatever you want. Yeah. So let me know if you've seen this, if you've tried them. I might have to give it all a try. It looks like they've got some available tools as well. It might be something else to think about for my grandson's birthday. Anyway, all right. So let's get on to what we have done so far this week. Finally getting back to a little bit of work on the YB-35. Actually, it'll be the XB-35, the twin prop. This was the very first incarnation of it. And then they decided there was too much vibration happening with this twin propeller installation, so they went to a single four-blade prop, and that became the YB-35. So you had the XB first, and then the YB. But I am building the XB version, and I'm gonna have to assemble these fairings with the props on them already before I can even prime anything. I wouldn't normally do that, but the way this all goes together, so I've got them taped together for the moment just to make sure I had the right pieces pairing with each other. So anyway, the prop goes on like that, and then you've got this inlet that gets put on here. All right, and remember, it's a pusher, so the nose cone on the propellers is facing aft, right? So you've got your air inlet intake here for cooling, and then your prop wash going the other way. And I just don't see any other way to assemble this after the fact. Because if I put the fairing halves together and glue them, well, then I can't get my prop shaft in, right? And, even that, it's a little bit flimsy. I may have to I might have to shim that a little bit anyway. So you see on the back side of this, you've got this end cap on the shaft, a little bearing of sorts maybe. But it just, you know, it captures it inside the fairing and allows everything to spin. But I'm just noticing that's really loose. So I might need to shim that up just a touch, right? Yeah, but so like I said, if I were to glue this together first and then, you know, add this inlet to it first, I can't get the prop shaft in there properly and still get it to spin. Now I could cut that cap off and just glue the props on. They would never move, which I don't know, maybe that's a better way to do it anyhow. But yeah, normally I would prime everything before assembly. But in this case, I don't think I'm gonna go that route. Because I think I want this assembly all put together first. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I'm working on at the moment. After giving it a little bit more thought, I decided that I would just glue the props into position. So I've glued the two halves of each pylon together. I've glued on the air intake, and I actually used a little bit of the Vallejo plastic putty in there because there was just a little bit of a gap. They didn't fit real tight. So I put the putty in there, and then once all that's dried, I can sand it down some. This way, everything will be a little easier to prime even. I took the little cap off the back of the shaft and removed the rear prop, or in this case, it's actually this would be the forward prop. This would be the rear prop. Anyway, so I'm gonna let all that dry and then, you know, give it a quick sanding at first. Then we'll shoot it with primer, take a closer look, and sand as necessary there. And then we'll start doing some more assembly work. All right, it's starting to come together, but I'm at a point where I need to start putting primer on things. But I also have to do some things on the interior, like the interior of the belly portion of the center wing is supposed to be painted silver or aluminum, really. So I need to primer that and then shoot some aluminum on that, as well as the interior portion of the upper half, which is here on the table in front of me. I have already glued in these, they're basically spar boxes for the outer wingtips, which I also have. All right, so this is the bottom of the wing. So this is one of the wing tips, right? And I can tell already I'm gonna have to do a little filler work, probably where that seam is. But see, all this has to come together before it gets primered on the outside. So yeah, so the interior is going to get some primer and then aluminum colored paint. And then here, this is the top section of the center of the wing. And I need to glue on all of my engine nacelles before that gets any primer. Because I may need to add filler, I don't know. But that all has to happen prior to any primer. And primer has to happen before any paint. So we're not going strictly by the instructions because they don't really think ahead that way with all the parts and the painting. So yeah, that's where I'm at the moment. The nacelles are on, but I've got a little bit of gap filling to do where they set into the wing. And you can see there's an inset that it goes into to help with the alignment, but there's a bit of a gap all the way around on each one of them. So what I'm going to use is the Vallejo plastic putty, like I did on the intake portion of the nacelles. And then I'll go around with the tip of this. It's a fairly small tip, almost hypodermic style, a little bit larger than that. But then I'll go through with these little micro Q-tip things, cotton buds, and we'll drag it across those seams to help smooth it out and get rid of any excess putty that we might have gotten in there. And just like that, our gaps are filled. Now, I just put it on there, so we're going to let it dry for a while, and then I'll go through with probably a sanding film so I can get into that corner real tight, and we'll just sand away any little bit of excess that might still be there. The little micro Q-tip thing, that worked great to take the majority of it off, and it makes sure that it also gets into that gap where there is one. So, all right, so that'll dry, and then we'll start, we'll get the cockpit assembly put into the lower half, and then, okay, so cockpit, tail gunner, and then we'll bring the two halves together, and then we'll probably start thinking about primering the entire exterior before we do final paint. The printed instructions are pretty clear as to colors. The interior is in aluminum, and just about everything was aluminum on it. Of course, the outside of the aircraft had some stainless steel areas. Anyway, the landing gear, it does say had a zinc chromate color. And I have to trust that that's correct. I mean, there are no examples of this aircraft anymore anywhere in the world. They were all destroyed. But it makes sense that at least the landing gear bays, yeah, I did say landing gear, but I meant the bays. Landing gear bays would be zinc chromated. So I've got, this is the lower section of the XB35. So I've got it masked off. That was sprayed with black primer, the Mr. Color 1500 black. And I've also got the lower portion of the YB49 masked off and ready to paint. And we're going to paint this with the Mr. Hobby Mr. Color Interior Green C27. Let's do a little bit more of the assembly. So there's 15 grams or so of weight added to this section of the wing to help keep the nose on the ground when the wheels are on it. Otherwise, it could be, well, it won't be a tail sitter because there really isn't a tail. So a tailless sitter if you don't add that weight. So that's in there. And I nearly forgot to add our gun fairings to the wing. So it shows you applying them to the wing, but what the instructions don't remind you of is that there are actually locations to drill holes. Sorry, I'm getting off the camera here. There's locations on the inside of the wing to drill holes because these fairings have pins that line up with those holes. And I missed that. But luckily, where those holes were located in the wing was just visible enough from the outside that I could use a micro drill to start the hole and then increasingly make that hole bigger until it fit properly. And then I went from the inside and added a little bit of the Tamiya extra thin glue, and then while squeezing it on the outside to make sure they're flush with the wing, I ran a bead of the extra thin around the outside of it too. So those are all good. So now we're going to add the wing tips to the main part of the wing, the center section, and I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this filler glue or faller. It's similar, I would say, to the Revell Contacta cement, or even Testers had the little bottle of liquid glue. So it's not as thin as the Tamiya stuff. And what I'm going to do, there's a channel on the inside here, And I'm going to run a bead of this glue along that channel on the inside. All right. And then this wing spar matches that. There was the same kind of channel on the center section of the wing. So we'll put that there. Make sure our panel lines line up. There are panel lines on this. Now I'm pressing from the bottom because the weird thing is that that wing spar isn't the full thickness of the wing. So it really only makes contact on the bottom portion. But this is where I'm going to use some of the thin. So right on this seam here, we're going to add the thin. And since it's a hot glue, hopefully that will adhere pretty quickly. All right, we don't want any kind of a step. I want to make sure that's a flush fit. So, and I also want to do it without getting fingerprints in the glue. Not easy to do. All right. A little bit more right here. All right, I keep knocking over my other glue bottle. All right, and I kind of prepared ahead of time for this. So I have some 2-inch wide masking tape, or 1.5 inches. I'm going to lay across that seam on this side, and then we'll also run a bead of the Tamiya extra thin on this side, right in that seam. All right. And make sure we're getting that pressed together. And I have another piece of my masking tape here. I'll lay that across. All right, and we'll let that sit for a while to dry. And then once that one's dry, we can do the other wingtip. And I may even try to stand this on edge. I'll probably brace it somehow so that gravity's pulling that seam line together instead of trying to pull the top away from the bottom. That's going to do it for this week's video update, and hopefully next week we'll get quite a bit more of it finished. I'm leaning towards the XB35 will be on its landing gear, but I'm really considering putting the YB49 up in the air with its gear up. So I'm going to give that a little thought this week on how I'm going to manage that. And I'm going to do it for a couple of reasons. Firstly is storage space. It's going to be easier to hang these things from the ceiling than to find a shelf for them. Well, one will be on a shelf. The other one, I think I'm going to hang it from the ceiling. And then secondly, I think for display purposes, having one on the tarmac and one flying overhead would look kind of cool. I just got to come up with a way to make some kind of an arm or something that would suspend it overhead. Anyhow, stick around for that coming up next week. Y'all have a great week. Thanks for tuning in. Like, share, give her a thumbs up. Peace and love.